Rain had been falling over Boston since the afternoon. The first rain of September carried a strange chill, the kind that seeped through every layer of clothing, slowing the whole world to a crawl. Inside a small room at St. Mary's Clinic, Evelyn Scott sat on a cold metal chair, her trembling hands clutching the ultrasound printout. A faint white blur appeared against the dark screen, tiny, fragile, as if one blink could erase it forever. "Congratulations, Ms. Scott," the doctor said softly. "You're 8 weeks pregnant." 8 weeks, a simple number yet sharp enough to slice through the life she thought she knew. The sky outside was dim and heavy. When she stepped out, rain slapped her face easy and merciless. Her torn umbrella flipped inside out, forcing her to run across Tremont Street, clutching the ultrasound in her coat pocket. City lights shimmered across puddles like shards of broken glass. She stopped beneath a cafe awning, breathing unevenly. Thomas had been gone for 3 weeks. No messages, no calls. His apartment was empty, stripped bare except for a few shirts and that bottle of cologne she used to love. Evelyn had told herself he'd come back, that he was busy or needed space. But tonight, holding that small image in her hand, she knew waiting wasn't an option anymore. Back at her tiny Beacon Hill apartment, she turned on the light. The weak yellow glow spilled across the walls, revealing the silence. The sofa where they used to watch movies, the mug he left behind, ghosts of a life that no longer existed. She took off her raincoat, placed the ultrasound on the table, and sank to the floor. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Who am I supposed to tell?" she whispered. Not her parents in Vermont, they'd never approved of Thomas. Not her coworkers' gossip would spread faster than wildfire. And Jenna, her only friend, was traveling through Europe. She opened her phone, scrolling to her last chat with Jenna. "Paris, breathtaking. Wish you were here." Beneath it, Evelyn attached the ultrasound photo. Her fingers hovered, typing slowly, as if each word carried a piece of her breaking heart. "I wish you were here, Jen. I need you. I'm pregnant. And he's gone." She hesitated a moment, then pressed send. The soft whoosh of the message leaving felt like a confession whispered into the void. She set the phone down and went to shower, letting the hot water run over her skin. She wanted to forget just for a few minutes. Forget Thomas. Forget the loneliness that hung over the city like a shadow. When she stepped out, hair dripping a familiar ping echoed through the quiet room. A message. Her heart clenched. Jenna. Or him. She dried her hands and picked up the phone. A new number glowed on the screen. "Is it mine?" Evelyn froze. Opening the chat, she saw the ultrasound photo, but something was wrong. The message hadn't gone to Jenna. It had gone to someone else. Her breath hitched. The number wasn't European. It was a Massachusetts area code. Oh, God. She typed quickly. "I'm sorry, wrong number. Please ignore this message." But the reply came almost instantly. "Evelyn Scott, 28 years old, works at Barker and Hale Law. Do you really think I can just ignore this?" Her blood turned to ice. How did this stranger know her name, her job? "Who are you?" The last person Thomas Hale should have lied to. The phone slipped from her hand. Her pulse raced, throat tightening. Thomas, the man she had trusted, who promised, "I'd never do anything to make you afraid." What had he done? Another message came. "Don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you or the baby, but we need to talk now." She didn't answer. Then came the sound, thump, 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 faint but real somewhere outside her window. A helicopter. Wind battered the glass. Curtains whipped like ghosts. A blinding light shone down through the rain. Her phone rang, the same number. Evelyn hesitated, then answered. A man's voice came through, deep, calm, and unnervingly steady. "You're shaking. I can hear it in your breathing. Don't be scared, Evelyn. I just want to meet you." "Who are you, Owen Parker?" "I don't know you." "No, but I know you. And I know the man who left you worked for me." The air thickened. She fought to keep her voice steady. "I have nothing to do with his business." "You're wrong. You and I are connected now by something very special." "Are you threatening me?" "No. I'm saving you. Saving me from the man you think you love." The line went dead. Outside, the helicopter lights kept circling. She rushed to the window, and for a split second, she saw 2 men in black standing on the street below, looking up at her apartment. Her heart pounded. She wanted to scream to call the police, but something in his voice stopped her. It wasn't exactly fear. It was something deeper, the instinctive sense that he was telling the truth. 3 hours later, the rain still hadn't stopped. Evelyn sat on the floor, hugging her knees, staring at the silent phone. Then, just before midnight, another message appeared. The helicopter's on the roof. You have 2 choices. Stay and become prey for the others, or come to me and live. No threats, no emojis, just words cold final, yet carrying a strange sense of promise. She clutched the ultrasound in her hand. Outside, the rhythmic hum of the blades echoed like a heartbeat. A voice inside her screamed, "Don't go!" But another, stronger, braver, whispered, "If this is the only way to learn the truth." She rose, threw on her coat, and stepped into the storm. Rain poured harder, as if the sky itself was watching her make a choice that would change everything. The rooftop door burst open. Wind howled through her hair. Before her stood a sleek black helicopter blades slicing the airlight, cutting through the darkness. A man waited by the door, long coat whipping in the storm. She didn't need to see his face to know. "Owen Parker, Evelyn Scott." He said, his voice steady even against the roar. "Thank you for trusting me even just once." She met his steel gray eyes, and in that instant something inside her shifted forever. The helicopter lifted off, tearing through the rain. Below, Boston faded, its golden lights blurring into tears. If one mistake could change your whole life, would you run from it or face it? Stay tuned for part 2. The Midnight Call, where Evelyn meets the mysterious man behind the message, Owen Parker. Wind howled through the glass as the helicopter tilted, pulling away from the rooftop of Beacon Hill. Evelyn gripped the seatbelt tightly, her palms slick with sweat. Below her, Boston stretched like a living map, glowing streets, the Charles River curving like a ribbon of silver in the dark. She had never been on a helicopter before, and she had never left home in the company of a man she had never met. That man, Owen Parker. "Are you all right?" The deep voice came through the noise-canceling headset. He sat across from her face, half lit by the soft green light, high-bridged nose, steel gray eyes gleaming like wet metal. "I'm fine," she murmured, though her voice trembled slightly. He nodded once, gaze steady on her the entire time. Silence settled between them, heavy but not empty. The rhythmic thrum of the blades above felt like a giant heart beating over their heads. "You know why I came for you, don't you?" "No," Evelyn said, staring out the window. "And I don't think I want to know." A brief pause. Then Owen leaned forward, light, casting sharper lines across his face, cold but not cruel. "Thomas Hale used to work for me," he said quietly. "He betrayed me. And you are the woman he left behind." Her lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "I figured." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. There was something in his gaze, not judgment, but observation. As though he wasn't just looking at her, but through her reading every fear, every heartbeat. They landed in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. The rain had stopped, but mist blanketed the ground like smoke. The helicopter's blades slowed to silence. 2 men in black suits opened the door. "This is my home," Owen said, his voice low, "and the only place you'll be safe now." Before her stood a stone mansion bathed in the gold glow of hundreds of lights. It wasn't ostentatious, but it radiated power. Cold, disciplined, lonely. Inside, the air carried the scent of cedarwood and coffee. Oil paintings lined the walls, stormy seas, dark skies. Everything about the place seemed to whisper one truth. Its owner was a man who didn't know peace. A slender elderly woman appeared by the living room door, silver hair neatly tied back. "This is Mrs. Ruth," Owen said. "She'll help you settle in." Evelyn nodded faintly, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." She was shown to a room on the 2nd floor, the fireplace casting soft amber light on the walls. Everything was elegant, spotless, too perfect, almost intimidating. On the table sat a cup of tea and a folded robe. Mrs. Ruth's voice was calm. "Mr. Parker says you should rest. He'll speak with you in the morning." Evelyn nodded, closing the door behind her. When the footsteps faded, the silence pressed close. She walked to the window. Outside, the forest was a black curtain. No cars, no voices, just wind and moonlight breaking through the clouds. She thought of Thomas, his confident smile, his promises. "I'll never leave you alone." And yet he had left her to face the consequences of his secrets. Evelyn laid a trembling hand on her still flat stomach and whispered, "We're going to survive, no matter what. Matter." The next morning, a knock came. "Mr. Parker is waiting in the library," Mrs. Ruth said. The library was at the end of the hallway. When Evelyn entered, Owen was standing by the tall window back, turned holding a coffee cup. The early light traced his profile sharp calm, almost sculptural. "Sit," he said without turning. She took the seat opposite him, posture straight, eyes wary. He turned and placed the cup on the table. "You don't trust me," he said quietly. "Good. In my world, trust is the fastest way to die. What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said. "Except the truth." "What truth?" He opened a black case on the desk and slid a photograph across the wood. Thomas in a black suit, smiling with several men outside a casino. Light glinted off his wristwatch, the one Evelyn had given him. "He wasn't just a liar," Owen said slowly. "He stole $2 million and a hard drive containing my client list. If that list leaks, people will die." Evelyn stared at the picture. She couldn't recognize the man in it. The man who had once whispered, "I love you," in the dark. "I didn't know any of this," she said softly. "I was just the woman he loved. The woman he loved." Owen's lips curved faintly, or the one he hid everything from to protect. His tone wasn't cynical. It was knowing, as if he spoke from experience. She said nothing. Owen poured coffee into her cup. "Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." "Then why bring me here?" He leaned forward slightly, hands resting on the table. "Because others will come for you, the ones he sold information to. And they don't talk before they kill." His voice was steady, but his eyes, when they met hers, carried something gentler. "You don't have to trust me, Evelyn. But you can believe this. I don't want to see anyone else die." She met his gaze. Something deep inside her stilled, not comfort, not calm, but a quiet recognition. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of the wind filled the room. "Do you know what Thomas left for you?" Owen asked at last. She shook her head. He placed a small silver key on the table. "We found it in your coat pocket. It's engraved Westlake Storage. The lease is under your name, not his." Evelyn lifted the key slowly. The cold metal bit into her skin, a secret hidden in plain sight right within her grasp. "You want me to help you find whatever it is, no. I want to know why he trusted you to keep it. Maybe because he believed in me." Owen looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Belief is a privilege for people who are about to lose everything." He stood and walked toward the door, pausing before leaving. "Mrs. Ruth will take you to collect your things this afternoon. If anything feels off, call me immediately." "Because I'm a witness?" Evelyn asked. "No," he said softly. "Because you're the only person he still cared about. And that makes you his weakness." He hesitated, then added, "It also makes you mine." The door closed behind him. Evelyn sat motionless, heart pounding. She didn't know what he meant, whether my weakness was a warning or a confession. But she knew one thing. Something inside her had shifted. Fear still lingered, but beneath it something else began to stir. Something dangerous. Something magnetic. As dusk fell over the pines, Evelyn stepped onto the balcony. Far below, she saw Owen by the lake speaking quietly on his phone, his shadow long across the damp grass. The air smelled of rain and wood smoke. She wondered who he really was, a criminal or a lost soul clinging to the last fragments of his humanity. She didn't know. But that night when he lifted his head and their eyes met from the balcony to the lawn, there was no fear, no hatred. Only that fragile pull, an invisible thread binding two strangers caught in the same destiny. The second morning at the Parker estate began with the soft echo of a piano drifting up from below. Evelyn woke slowly, her tousled hair spilling over a silk pillow. For a moment, she forgot where she was not in her cramped Boston apartment, where sirens sliced through her sleep and pale light leaked through worn curtains, but in a place where silence ruled. No city noise here, only wind, and music a haunting nocturne by Chopin tender and melancholic. She slipped from bed, wrapped herself in a robe, and followed the long corridor. The polished staircase gleamed under the morning sun. Owen sat at a black grand piano, back straight, fingers gliding across the keys as though he were speaking to ghosts. He didn't look up, but somehow he knew she was there. "You're up early," he said, still playing. "The music woke me." "Sorry." "Habit. You play beautifully." A faint smile touched his lips, rare fleeting softening his otherwise cold features. "Music," he said, "is the only thing that convinces me the world hasn't completely fallen apart." Evelyn stood still, watching his reflection ripple across the floor. In that moment, she didn't see the feared crime lord everyone whispered about. She saw a man alone, trapped inside his own fortress of silence. After breakfast, Owen invited her to walk the grounds. The autumn air smelled of apples and pine. Along the gravel path, faded hydrangeas swayed in the wind, while deer appeared and disappeared between the trees. "It's beautiful," Evelyn murmured. "You could stay here if you want," Owen replied. "It's safe. No one will find you." "Safe," she said quietly, "or imprisoned." He stopped walking. The light cut across his face, bright but cold. "I'm not imprisoning you, Evelyn. I'm keeping you alive. Others would turn you into prey." "Because of Thomas." "Because of Thomas?" He confirmed. "And what he did?" They walked in silence for a while before he asked, "Do you still love him?" The question froze her. She didn't know how to answer. Love and fear often blurred into the same shade of pain. "Maybe I did once," she said softly. "Now I just want to know how it all went so wrong." Owen looked at her for a long time, as if deciding whether she could bear the truth. "I used to ask myself the same thing," he said quietly. "Then I realized, sometimes betrayal isn't born from desire, but from fear." His voice was low-edged with something raw. Beneath the calm exterior, she sensed a wound that had never healed. That afternoon, Mrs. Ruth handed Evelyn an envelope. "Mr. Parker said you should see this." Inside was a copy of a storage lease Westlake Storage signed E. Scott. "Thomas used my name," Evelyn whispered, heart-pounding. "Yes," Owen said, appearing in the doorway. "And he hid something important there." "What do you want me to do? Come with me. You trust me?" "No," he said, his tone even. "But I trust my instincts." That night, they left the estate in a black SUV, driving west along the highway. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by endless stretches of road and shadow. Owen drove in silence, but his eyes flicked toward her now and then. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Not as much as when you sent a helicopter to my roof," she said with a small, wry smile. He chuckled, a brief, quiet sound. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just didn't want to be late." "Do you always arrive on time?" "Not for everyone." He said it softly, part confession, part regret. Silence settled again, heavy, but not hostile. Something else hummed beneath it, unspoken and electric. By the time they reached Westlake Storage, night had swallowed the sky. The parking lot was deserted, lit by a flickering neon sign. Owen stepped out, pulled a gun from the console, checked it, then slid it beneath his coat. "Stay close to me," he ordered. "Don't step away." Evelyn nodded, pulse racing. They moved through rows of identical metal doors until they stopped at Unit 47B. The silver lock glinted under the light. Evelyn lifted the small key. It fit perfectly. The door creaked open, revealing dust boxes and a single black suitcase. Owen approached, unlocked it, and flipped the lid. Inside, no cash, no gold. Only a stack of files, a few USB drives, and one photograph. 3 men stood in the photo. Thomas Owen, and a third man. Owen's hand tightened around the picture, jaw-clenching. "Who's that?" Evelyn asked. "Jonathan Parker," he said quietly. "My brother." Her breath caught. "Your brother dead. 2 years ago, in an operation Thomas led." He set the photo down, his hand trembling slightly, the first crack in his composure she had ever seen. "I trusted him," Owen said hoarsely. "He promised he'd bring Jonathan back. Instead, I buried an empty coffin." Evelyn stayed silent. She could feel his anger, but beneath it, grief. Raw, real human. "So everything you've done," she whispered, "is revenge." "No," he said. It's to understand why. A faint noise outside shattered the quiet. Owen stiffened, motioning for silence. He pulled her into the shadows beside the wall. A shadow slipped past the door, fast, sharp, then vanished. The storage door slammed shut. The lights went out. Evelyn froze. In the darkness, his breath brushed her ear. "Hold on to me," Owen whispered. "Don't let go." A beam of light swept across the floor, then gunfire. Evelyn gasped, but Owen pushed her down, covering her with his body. The sharp tang of gunpowder filled the air. A voice shouted from outside Parker, "Hand it over, and we'll let you live." Owen didn't respond. He glanced at her, signaling for silence. His eyes glinted in the dark, cold but focused. 2 more shots. Then silence. When the emergency lights flickered back on, 2 bodies lay motionless in the doorway. Owen pulled her up, breathing hard. "Bratva," he said shortly. They tracked the key's signal. "They know what Thomas hid here isn't just money." "What is it?" she demanded. "A list of every person he ever worked with, dead or alive." His gaze met hers, dark, unflinching. "I'm on that list. And so are you." Evelyn recoiled, blood draining from her face. "What Thomas registered you as a co-owner of the account, his insurance policy in case he got caught. To Bratva, that makes you a traitor too." Her world tilted. Love, fear, trust, all crumbled at once. "So I'm the excuse they'll use to kill you." "No," Owen said quietly, stepping closer. "You're the reason I'm still alive." She looked up, stunned. "What do you mean?" Owen held her gaze, exhaustion flickering behind the steel. "When Jonathan died, I stopped believing in anything. I became what people said I was, a ghost with a pulse. Then you sent that message." His voice broke, half confession, half curse. "I didn't know what I was searching for, justice, redemption, maybe both. But when I saw that ultrasound photo, I knew there was still something worth protecting." Evelyn said nothing. The wind slipped through the door, rustling the photograph on the floor. She didn't know whether to fear him or trust him, only that her heartbeat had changed. Not frantic this time, but alive. That night, they returned to the mansion under a steel-gray sky. Evelyn sat by the fire, watching the flames fade to embers. Owen stood by the window, coat stained with blood, gaze lost somewhere beyond the trees. Neither spoke. But in the silence, something undeniable had taken root. A shift neither could reverse. Because from the moment he took her hand in the darkness of that storage room, they were no longer the captor and the captive, but 2 souls bound by the same wound, the betrayal of the past. It had been raining in New Hampshire for 3 days straight. Not a storm, but a steady, endless drizzle that cloaked the Parker estate in fog, isolating it from the rest of the world like a forgotten island. Evelyn stood by the window, watching raindrops trail down the glass. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft crackle of wood burning in the fireplace. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Owen the moment his finger pulled the trigger inside the storage room. Cold, fast, precise. Part of her still trembled at the memory. But another part remembered how he'd shielded her from the bullets, calm, fearless, and almost gentle. She didn't know whether to thank him or to hate him. To thank him for saving her, or to hate him for being the reason she was trapped in this storm of blood and vengeance. That afternoon, Mrs. Ruth knocked and left a tray of food with a small envelope on top. "Mr. Parker would like you to join him for dinner," she said, her tone holding something unreadable. Evelyn picked up the note. Owen's handwriting was neat, sharp. 7 p.m., East Glass Room. There's something I need to tell you. And beneath it, a smaller line. It's not about Thomas. Her chest tightened. Not about Thomas. Then what about us? The glass room faced the lake. Rain pattered against the roof, whispering endlessly. When Evelyn entered, Owen was already there. He'd shed his usual jacket, wearing only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The golden light from the hanging lamp warmed his tan skin, making him look both distant and strangely human. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "You invited me," she replied, keeping her voice steady. He smiled, faint but real. "Yes, but I wasn't planning on calling this a dinner. I just want you to see something." He handed her a printed sheet, a scan from the USB they'd found in the suitcase. A list of names, long over 40 in total. Several were marked in red. "These are the people Thomas worked with," Owen said, voice low. "Half of them are dead." Evelyn's eyes fell to the last name, Jonathan Parker. "Your brother?" "Yes." His tone dropped to a whisper. "I used to believe Jonathan was killed during the Moscow operation. But in this data, there's an encrypted line proof that the informant who sold him to Bratva was Thomas. He traded my brother's life for freedom. And $2 million. Evelyn slowly set the paper down. In that moment, she saw it beneath Owen's calm exterior, a fury held together by steel. But that restraint, that deliberate control was what made him both dangerous and heartbreakingly human. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a long time before answering. "Nothing. Not yet." He poured a drink and pushed a glass toward her. "I need to think." "Alcohol for a pregnant woman?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. He froze, then replaced it with a glass of water. "Apologies. I'm not used to having someone else in this house." "You don't usually have guests. No one stays long enough to be called one." She studied him. The words were light, but his eyes carried a shadow, the kind that only long sleepless nights could carve. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked. 4 years, he said almost absently. "After Jonathan died, I ended all field work, focused on keeping the empire from collapsing. But sometimes I wonder, what's the point of surviving?" The words slipped out softly, but they hit deep like a stone dropped into still water. Something in Evelyn's chest ached. She understood that kind of loss, waking up each day, unsure who or what you're still living for. Maybe, she said slowly, you're alive to find the part of yourself you thought was gone. His gaze lingered on her. A long silence. Then he nodded once. Maybe. The rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled far away. Lightning flashed through the glass roof, scattering across their faces. Evelyn shivered. Owen noticed, stood up, and took his coat. He draped it over her shoulders, the fabric warm, smelling faintly of cedar and smoke. "Thank you," she murmured. "You're cold," he said, adjusting the collar slightly. "This room looks beautiful, but the draft is terrible." The gesture, careful, respectful, yet intimate, made her heart skip. She looked up, and their eyes met a wordless exchange, fragile but charged. Owen's voice dropped. "You don't have to be afraid of me, Evelyn." "You think I'm afraid?" "Not right now," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "But maybe before, when I entered your life by helicopter." "Yes," she admitted. That wasn't exactly the gentlemanly way to meet a woman. He laughed quietly, a sound rare and unguarded. "If I could go back, I'd knock on your door." "Only knock." His gaze darkened, teasing, but edged with truth. "Depends on whether you'd open it." Outside, thunder boomed. The lights flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Evelyn gasped. "It's fine," Owen said calmly. "Just the generator." He reached for a small oil lamp on the table and lit it. The flame glowed between them, painting their faces in warm gold. "Sit. I'll check the fuse later." She nodded, but as he leaned closer, his hand brushed her wrist, light accidental but electric. For a moment, neither moved. Evelyn's pulse stuttered. She wanted to pull away, yet he didn't release her, not right away. Just one heartbeat, one breath long enough for silence to thicken between them. Then he let go. His voice roughened. "Sorry. I forgot you're still a stranger in my house." "No," she whispered. "Not entirely." They looked at each other. No words followed. The rain spoke for them. That night, sleep still wouldn't come. The rain continued, and somewhere in the house, the piano began again. Not Chopin this time, but something slower, deeper, like a farewell whispered to the dark. She slipped on a robe and walked down the hall. In the living room, Owen sat alone at the piano, back, slightly bent fingers gliding over the keys. No audience, no mask, only him and the sound of memory. "You're not sleeping?" she asked softly. He looked up, smiled faintly. "When your head's filled with faces you'll never see again." "Sleep feels expensive." She sat beside the piano, silent. After a while, he asked, Have you ever thought about running away from here the first day? She said. But then I realized no matter where I go, the people who want me dead will still be out there. So I stayed. Stayed for safety. She met his eyes. No, I stayed because I want to understand you. His hands stilled on the keys. The lamplight flickered, casting their shadows onto the wall, two shapes overlapping, then merging into one. Outside, the thunder had faded, leaving only the rain. Inside the stone house, his music slowed, softened, and stopped. He turned to her, voice low and weary. Evelyn, don't try to understand me. Men like me only have two choices: to rule or to be destroyed. There's no room for feeling. Her reply was soft but steady, then let me be the exception. Owen looked at her, and for the first time something flickered behind his eyes, a crack in the armor he'd built around himself for years. That night, neither of them left. The rain kept falling outside, but within the cold stone walls, something small, a warmth, a fragile kind of faith was born. The next morning, the New Hampshire sky was the color of ash. Mist blanketed the lake, and last night's rain left long streaks on the window trails that looked eerily like tear stains. Evelyn sat at the table, absently tracing the rim of a cold teacup. She didn't look outside, only at the thin curl of steam dissolving into air. In her mind, Owen's words from the night before still echoed. Men like me have no room for feelings. But the way he had said it, rough, weary, like someone who had endured too much, made her believe that maybe once he had felt something. He just didn't have the courage to admit it anymore. Mrs. Ruth entered, carrying a brown envelope. "This came for you," she said. "No delivery name. It was left at the gate. Mr. Parker doesn't know." Evelyn took it. Printed across the front were the words, "Do not open unless you're ready for the truth." Her breath caught. The handwriting, the angle of the letters, the space between them she recognized instantly. Thomas. She carried the envelope to her room, locked the door, and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and an old photograph. 3 men smiling in the sunlight, Owen, Jonathan, and Thomas. "Eve, if you're reading this, it means they've found out. I can't come back. But remember this, not everything Owen tells you is true. I did what I had to do to survive. And I did it. To protect you." At the bottom, scrawled hastily, "Something is watching him. And now, maybe you too." Evelyn gripped the paper, heart pounding. Thomas's words, truth or another lie? She couldn't tell anymore where one ended and the other began. That afternoon, she found Owen standing on the porch, speaking to someone on the phone. The wind tugged at his black coat. When he saw her, he ended the call. "What is it?" Evelyn held up the envelope. "A letter. From Thomas." His expression darkened. He took it, read quickly, and when he reached the last line, the corner of his mouth lifted, not in amusement, but in that weary, cynical way of a man too used to betrayal. "You believe him?" "I don't know. You want to believe him, don't you?" Evelyn said nothing. The question wasn't an accusation, it was a test, and she had no answer. Later, Owen led her down to the lakeshore. The sky hung heavy and gray. Wind rippled across the surface, scattering dull reflections of clouds. "Did you know," Owen said quietly, "Thomas once told me he didn't believe in anything except fear. He said, 'The one who fears loss will always be the first to betray.'" Evelyn asked, "And what about you? What do you believe in?" He bent, picked up a stone, and tossed it into the water. Ripples spread outward, fading as quickly as they appeared. "I used to believe in family," he said. "Now I only believe in results." "That's cold. Not cold. Realistic." She studied him, her tone soft but steady. "But if being realistic means being alone, is it worth it?" He turned. Their eyes met. Just for a moment, but long enough that Owen couldn't find words. Instead of answering, he stepped closer, stopping only a few feet away. "Don't trust Thomas, Evelyn. He'll use emotion to make you doubt yourself." "And you," she asked quietly, "do you use logic to hide what you're afraid of?" He froze, then exhaled, barely audible. "Maybe." That night the wind rose. Evelyn woke to a noise outside her door, faint, deliberate. She slipped on her robe and stepped into the hallway. A shadow moved down the staircase. "Ruth," she called softly. No answer. By the time she reached the foyer, the figure was gone. The front door stood ajar. Rain swept in, leaving muddy footprints across the wooden floor. Evelyn bent down and picked up a wet scrap of paper caught against the threshold. The ink had smeared, but the message was still legible. "Leave now. Parker isn't the only one hunting you." The next morning, Owen left before dawn without a word. Ruth seemed uneasy. Evelyn tried to appear calm, though her pulse betrayed her. She kept thinking about the note about Thomas's warning about Owen's eyes the night before. Something was unfolding around her bigger than any of them, and she was nothing more than a pawn. Unable to stay idle, she went into Owen's library. On his desk, the computer was still on. A GPS map glowed on the screen, one red dot blinking deep in the northern woods. Tracker number 02, active. Her breath caught. The location matched the place Owen had once said no one was allowed to go Jonathan Parker's old house. If Thomas had been telling the truth, the thing watching Owen might be there. And if Owen had gone there alone? Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and keys. Rain fell again as she drove. The road was narrow, slick, lined with whispering trees. After nearly an hour, she reached it, a moss-covered stone house hidden in the forest. The door was ajar, a faint light flickering inside. "Owen," she called. No answer. She stepped in. The air smelled of damp wood and old smoke. Photographs lay scattered across the table. Jonathan Owen? And herself. Evelyn froze. Across the far wall, scrawled in red paint, were the words, "There are no innocents in this game." "Put it down, Evelyn." Owen's voice came from behind her. He stood in the doorway, rain-soaked gun in hand. His expression darkened when he saw the photo she held. "You've been watching me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," he said evenly, stepping closer. "But I know someone else has." "And I needed you safe in my house." "Safe?" she shot back. "You mean locked away, tracked, every breath monitored?" His jaw tightened. "You don't understand. Then make me understand. Owen, who am I in all of this, bait hostage or your redemption?" Silence. Rain hammered against the roof. Owen set the gun down. His voice was lower now, rougher. "You're the only one who hasn't lied to me." She hesitated. Even Jonathan, Thomas, Ruth, they all had secrets. But you, Evelyn, you look at me without fear. You remind me who I was before all of this began. Her anger melted into something uncertain. She wanted to believe him, and she was terrified because she almost did. Owen turned away as if her gaze itself was too much. "There's someone else in this," he said. "The one who sent that letter. The one who wants us to turn against each other, who the current head of Bratva. He used to work for me." Evelyn's breath caught. "You mean, yes," he cut her off. "I was the hunter once." She stared at him. "And now I'm the hunted." Wind slammed the door open. Rain lashed through, blurring the red words on the wall. In the flash of lightning, Owen grabbed her, shielding her from the cold. She trembled not from fear, but from the nearness of him, from the warmth in his breath against her ear. "Evelyn," he whispered, "I won't let them touch you, even if I have to become a monster again." She looked up at him. The hardness in his eyes had cracked, replaced by something raw human. "You don't have to be a monster," she murmured. "Just don't give up." Owen leaned his forehead against hers. And for a heartbeat in the middle of rain and ruin, they found something real, a fragile truth between two broken souls. For a moment, there were no hunters or hunted, only two people holding on to each other at the edge of the world. Outside, unseen, another pair of eyes watched them through a scope glowing red, cold, and precise as a blade waiting in the dark. The next morning, fog still draped the pine forest like a shroud. Owen hadn't slept. He stood by the window, fingers tight around a cup of cold coffee, eyes fixed on the pale distance where the echoes of gunfire from the night before still seemed to linger. Evelyn slept on the armchair, wrapped in the coat he had put over her. Her damp hair clung to her cheek, her skin pale from the cold. Owen watched her for a long time. There was something in her weariness that he couldn't look away from. She didn't belong to his world, a world of blood deals and silence. but she was the one thing that reminded him he was still human. At noon, Owen's phone rang. He answered, listening for a few seconds before saying quietly, "Send me the coordinates." Evelyn stirred awake as he was getting ready to leave. "Where are you going?" "Someone wants to see you," he said. "He insists on talking in person." Thomas Owen nodded once. "He's alive." Evelyn froze. "That's impossible. I saw him get shot. He was dragged out before I could confirm the body. And if it's really him, he wants to meet you at Riverside Cafe 3 p.m. "You're going alone?" "No. You're coming with me." Evelyn stepped back. "You're using me as bait." "No," Owen said evenly, "but he won't show unless he sees you." "I need answers, Evelyn, and maybe you do too." She didn't reply, but he was right. She needed to know whether the man who once promised never to leave her had truly become the monster Owen claimed he was. The black SUV sped along the old highway, wind lashing against the windows. Evelyn sat still, hands clenched in her lap, eyes fixed on the road. Owen drove in silence, glancing at her in the rearview mirror from time to time. "Do you think he'll come if he still has a conscience?" she murmured. "He won't let me die without an explanation." Owen gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I used to think that about my brother, Jonathan." He nodded. "Before he was killed, I believed he'd never betray me. But people, when cornered, will do anything to survive." Evelyn looked at him softly. "Maybe that's because you've never known what it's like to have nothing left to lose." He didn't respond, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened. Riverside Cafe sat quietly along the banks of the Connecticut River. The sky was dim light reflecting white and cold off the water. Inside, a few customers lingered while an old jazz tune hummed low. A waitress led them to a window table. Evelyn sat down, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. Owen sat across from her, eyes scanning every corner of the room with the precision of a predator. Moments later, her phone buzzed. A message. "Don't be afraid, I'm on the other side of the river." Evelyn turned to the window. Across the misty bank stood a tall figure in a gray coat holding a phone. "It's him," she whispered. Owen narrowed his eyes. "He's not stupid enough to come close. He wants us to move." Her phone vibrated again. "Come alone. If he's with you, I won't appear." She looked up. "He only wants me." Owen's voice hardened. "No, you don't understand," she said quietly. "If I don't go, we'll never get the truth." He stared at her for a long moment. His gaze, for the first time, wasn't commanding. It was afraid. "Evelyn, he tricked me once with the same look you have right now. Don't make me lose someone again." She smiled faintly. "I'm not your brother Owen. I'll come back." And she walked out before he could stop her. The riverbank was silent, swallowed in fog. The air was damp and sharp. Evelyn moved carefully toward the shadowed figure waiting by the trees. When she came close enough, Thomas turned. He looked thinner, hollow-eyed, the gray in his beard catching the pale light. But it was him, the man who had once held her in Boston, kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're home. Eve." His voice cracked. "I thought you were dead. And I thought you betrayed me." Thomas lowered his head. "I didn't have a choice. Parker wanted that list, and his brother died because of it. I had to give it to Bratva, or they would have killed you." Evelyn's lips trembled, a bitter smile forming through tears. "So you saved me, by making Owen kill you." "He wouldn't kill you," Thomas said softly. "He couldn't. He loved you once." Evelyn froze. "What did you say?" "You don't remember that day in Boston, the first time you came to my office. The man who brought you tea wasn't my assistant. It was Owen." Her eyes widened. "He... what?" "He knew you before I did. He watched you quietly. And when I brought you into this mess, he lost control because you reminded him of someone. Who? His wife. She was pregnant too. She died because of secrets he tried to bury." Evelyn shook her head. "You're lying." Thomas gave a small, broken smile. "I wish I were." A gunshot split the air. A bullet tore through the fog, slamming into the tree beside Thomas. Evelyn screamed, falling to the ground. Owen appeared from the ridge, gun raised, eyes blazing. "Get away from her!" he roared. Thomas stepped back, hands lifted. Owen, listen, there's nothing left to say. Owen fired again. The bullet grazed Thomas's shoulder. Blood splattered across his coat. Evelyn ran forward, placing herself between them. Stop, you'll kill him. Owen froze, gun trembling slightly in his grip. In her eyes, terrified pleading, he suddenly saw another woman years ago. Marie, pregnant, bleeding in his arms. His vision blurred. His breath hitched. Thomas sank to his knees, clutching his wound. She's not your wife, Owen, he rasped. Don't make the same mistake. In the distance, sirens blared Bratva's convoy closing in. Owen grabbed Evelyn's hand, pulling her toward the car. Go, but Thomas. Leave him, she turned. Thomas was slumped against a tree, eyes glazed, voice barely audible. Eve, he whispered, believe me, none of us are innocent. Tears blurred her vision as Owen pulled her away. They reached the SUV. Owen started the engine, speeding down the wet road. Neither spoke. Only the heavy drumming of rain filled the silence. Finally, Evelyn said quietly, You had a wife. Owen's hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't answer at first. Then, barely above a whisper, Yes, her name was Marie. She died because someone betrayed me. I couldn't save her. And you think I'll end up the same way? He looked at her, then eyes tired, raw, stripped of every wall he'd built. I don't know, but I swear I won't let it happen again. Evelyn studied him. For the first time, she didn't see the feared Mafia Boss. She saw a man who had forgotten how to forgive himself. She placed her hand gently over his. You can't save the past, Owen, but you can still save what's here. He tightened his grip, the smallest sign that he wanted to believe her. Outside, the rain began to fade. A thin strip of light broke through the clouds, pale but real. They didn't speak again. They just sat there, two lost souls who had escaped one trap, unaware that they might already be driving straight into the next one. 2 days after the confrontation at Riverside, the Parker mansion fell silent again. But Evelyn knew that silence was no longer peace. It was the pause before the storm. Owen barely left his office. He kept the door locked, burying himself in classified files Ruth quietly delivered each morning. Every time she tried to talk to him, he replied with only a few short sentences. Eyes distant, as though his mind was somewhere far away. She didn't know if it was because of Thomas, because of the words he'd said before he vanished, or something darker that Owen was afraid to face. But she could feel him slipping away, as if a chasm was opening between them, and she didn't know if she had the courage to cross it. That afternoon, Ruth brought her a stack of old folders. Mr. Parker said you should see these, she murmured. He said, It's time you knew. Evelyn opened the files. They were internal investigation reports from Parker Industries dated 5 years earlier, the time of Jonathan's death. Across the cover in Owen's sharp handwriting were the words, Do not share. Code M3, classified. As she read, her hands began to tremble. Jonathan hadn't died because of Bratva. He'd died in an explosion, and the report listed the prime suspect who escaped as Owen Parker. Evelyn staggered back, the folder slipping from her hands. Images collided in her mind. Owen pulling the trigger on Thomas at Riverside, the cold precision in his eyes, the weight of secrets he never explained. No, it couldn't be true. He couldn't have killed his own brother. When Owen walked in, she was still frozen. Do you know what I found in there? She said, her voice shaking. He stopped at the doorway. I'm guessing Ruth brought you something I wasn't ready for you to see. It wasn't a mistake, she snapped. It's the truth, isn't it? She threw the folder at his feet. You killed your brother. Owen closed his eyes. For a brief, fragile moment, exhaustion washed over his face like a shadow. No, he said quietly. I didn't pull the trigger. But I let him die. Evelyn stepped back. What's the difference? He walked closer, his tone low, heavy. That day, I was ordered to retreat. Jonathan stayed behind to retrieve data from Bratva's main server. I could have gone back for him, but if I had 20 of my men would have died. I made a choice. Silence. The words fell between them like lead. Evelyn looked at him, no longer seeing the man who had held her gently during a storm, but someone carrying a sentence no court could pronounce. "You survived," she said softly. "But you stopped living, didn't you?" Owen's gaze lifted empty. Maybe. Later that day, Evelyn went up to the locked attic room that once belonged to Jonathan. She found the key. Inside, everything was frozen in dust. A photograph of the 3 Parker brothers, a small leather journal, and an old voice recorder. She pressed play. The tape hissed, then a voice Jonathan's filled the room. Younger, steadier, and filled with urgency. "If someone's hearing this, it means I failed. Bratva doesn't just want the money. They want the identity of the child. Owen's and Marie's. They know she's pregnant." Evelyn froze. Her hand shook as she stared at the recorder. Marie Owen's wife had been killed because of the baby. Jonathan's voice continued fading toward the end. "Owen thinks he can hide it, but every secret has a price. If I don't make it back, tell him, I'm sorry." The tape clicked off. The room fell silent. When she came downstairs, Owen was standing in the hallway. His eyes darkened when he saw the recorder in her hand. "So you found it." "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, voice trembling. "Why let me believe she died because of betrayal when it was your past that killed her, because the truth changes nothing? It's killing you." He stepped closer, voice dropping to a near plea. "Evelyn, you have to understand, you're carrying a child. I can't let history repeat itself." "That's not the real reason," she said, eyes glistening. "You're not protecting me, Owen. You're punishing yourself by keeping me here surrounded by ghosts to remind you of what you lost." He stood still. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass. "Maybe you're right," he murmured. "But if this is the only way I can make it right, I'll accept it." That night, Evelyn sat alone in the library. The firelight flickered over her face, painting her expression in amber and shadow. On the table lay Jonathan's handwritten note. They know the identity of the child. If Bratva had once wanted Owen's child, what about hers? The child of Evelyn and Thomas. A man once tied to Bratva could be the new target. A chilling thought struck her. Maybe they weren't after Owen for revenge or money. Maybe they were after the child. The door creaked open. She jumped. Owen stepped in. No gun, no coat, just himself. Weary, but real. "You're still awake." "I can't sleep." He sat across from her, the flames reflected in his eyes. "I used to think I could fix my mistakes by controlling everything," he said quietly. "But you've made me realize some things can only be saved through trust." Evelyn pressed her lips together. "Do you trust me now?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering softly. "But I trust the way you look at me, like maybe I'm still someone who can be forgiven." A fragile silence stretched between them. "Maybe," Evelyn whispered, "because I see a man trying to live again, not just the one who once killed." Suddenly, the lights in the library flickered and went out. The faint hiss of the power line echoed through the walls. Owen was on his feet instantly. "Get to the basement, now!" Before she could react, he pulled her close, pressing a hand to his earpiece. From the radio, Giovanni's voice crackled. "They've breached the west perimeter. 3 men, armed." Owen drew his pistol, barking orders into the comm lock down the 3rd floor. "Kill the external lights." Then he turned to her, calm but deadly serious. "Evelyn, listen to me. If anything happens, you go with Ruth to the bunker. Don't come back." "Understand?" She shook her head. "I'm not leaving you. This isn't a choice. But you said you'd never let me be afraid again." "And I won't," he said, eyes blazing. "But you have to help me keep that promise by staying alive." He handed her a small pistol from his belt. "Safety's off. Pull the trigger if you have to." Her hands shook as she took it. "Will you come back?" He leaned down, resting his forehead gently against hers. "Always." When he left the library, the only light left was the fire's glow. Evelyn sank into the chair, heart pounding, listening as his footsteps faded. Then a muffled explosion outside. A shout. And gunfire. She clutched the weapon in trembling hands, caught between 2 fears, the fear of losing him and the fear of admitting that somewhere along the way, her heart was no longer her own. Outside, the night roared, a living, breathing beast, waiting to tear apart what little peace remained in the Parker house. The gunfire finally stopped after nearly 20 minutes. A heavy silence settled over the Parker estate, thick and suffocating. Evelyn crouched behind the fireplace, her fingers still gripping the small pistol Owen had given her. Cold sweat traced down her spine. The wooden door remained closed. No footsteps, no voices. Only the faint scent of gunpowder metal and ash, the lingering smell of burned secrets. When Ruth appeared, her face was pale. "Stay here," she whispered. "He's outside. Someone's hurt." Evelyn shot to her feet. Owen, Ruth didn't answer. She didn't have to. The fear in her eyes said enough. She ran outside, the cold wind cutting against her skin. The ground was stained with mud and blood. Owen was kneeling in the middle of the courtyard shirt, soaked crimson, one hand pressed to his shoulder where a bullet had torn through. Two bodies lay beside him, strangers in black, unrecognizable. When he saw her, he shook his head weakly. "Don't come closer, Evelyn." But she ignored him, dropping to her knees in front of him. "You're hurt, just a graze." He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. They were only a warning. Someone's behind this. Someone smarter than Bratva. Who? He hesitated, then said slowly. Someone inside Parker Industries. Someone I once trusted. Evelyn could hear the despair in his voice. Not anger this time, but the exhaustion of a man who had run out of places to hide from the truth. After Ruth treated the wound, Owen ordered the entire estate into lockdown. Evelyn followed him down to the secure basement where Jonathan's original files were stored. The room was cold, lit by harsh fluorescent light. Steel shelves lined the walls filled with sealed folders. At the center stood a massive safe engraved with J. Parker. "What did Jonathan keep in here?" she asked quietly. "Evidence," Owen replied. "Of who really helped Bratva." He unlocked the safe, his hand trembling not from pain, but from knowing that whatever lay inside could destroy everything he'd built. The heavy door creaked open. Inside were a hard drive, several folders, and an old envelope. Owen reached for the envelope first. On the front, in a familiar hand, were the words, "For Owen, if you still want the truth." He opened it, reading slowly, each word cutting deeper than the last. "Owen, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I discovered that the one who sold information to Bratva wasn't Thomas. It was Marie. She did it because they threatened the baby. I tried to save her but failed. Don't let hatred blind you. She chose to die to keep your child safe." Owen's fingers tightened until the paper crumpled in his hand. He stepped back, the world seeming to tilt beneath him. "No." His voice broke. "No, Marie didn't betray me." Evelyn didn't speak. Tears ran down her cheeks. Not for Marie, but for the man in front of her, crumbling under the weight of everything he'd tried to bury. "Do you believe Jonathan?" she asked softly. "He never lied to me." "Then believe him now. Believe that she didn't betray you. She was forced to." Owen bowed his head, both hands gripping the table as his shoulders trembled. Evelyn stepped closer, resting a hand on his back. No words, just a touch enough to crack the armor he'd worn for too long. That night, he wasn't in his room. Evelyn found him on the rooftop, wind whipping through his hair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She stood behind him in silence for a moment. "Are you leaving?" she finally asked. He didn't turn around. "I thought if I could find the traitor, I'd feel free. But all I found was myself." "Himself," she echoed softly. He gave a hollow laugh. "I killed everyone I ever loved with suspicion, with fear, by trying to protect them from me." She stepped closer. "You didn't kill them, Owen. You just never learned how to forgive." He turned, then moonlight cutting across his face, half in shadow, half in light. And in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't before. Not anger, not vengeance, but vulnerability. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "if one day I don't come back, leave this place. Don't look for me. Don't talk like you're already gone. I'm not dying," he said, voice barely above the wind. "But I have something left to finish, and I don't want you to see it." She reached out, gripping his wrist. "If you go, I go with you." "No, Evelyn. You don't get to decide that for me." They stood in silence. Then Owen whispered almost to himself, "You scare me." She blinked. "Why?" "Because if I look at you again, I won't be able to walk away. The night wind roared. Evelyn stepped closer until there was barely any distance between them. Then, "Don't," she whispered. Owen looked at her. In the moonlight, her eyes glimmered, not with defiance, but with truth. He leaned down gently, as though afraid to break something fragile. Their first kiss was quiet, painful, and achingly real, two broken souls finding each other in the ruins of their past. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "I shouldn't have." "Don't say that," she murmured, "because I couldn't stop either." The next morning, Owen was gone. Ruth said he'd left at dawn no luggage, only his gun and Jonathan's hard drive. On the desk, he had left a folded note. "Don't worry, I'm going to find the one who ordered her death. When this is over, I'll come back. If I don't wait." At the bottom, a red fingerprint, his blood. Evelyn clutched the letter, tears falling freely. Her heart ached, but beneath the pain was something else, pride. For the first time, Owen Parker had gone out not for revenge, but to protect what he truly loved. 3 days passed with no word. Evelyn lived like a ghost, every sound at the gate making her heart leap. On the 4th evening, Ruth entered the room pale and trembling. "Someone sent this," she said, handing Evelyn a small wooden box. Inside was Jonathan's hard drive and a note. "If you're reading this, I'm out of time. But the truth must be released. Give it to the authorities. And Evelyn, if you still believe this." I never really left. There was no signature, but she knew the handwriting. Owen. She opened the drive. Inside were the full records of Parker Industries' money laundering contracts, secret transactions, and a video of Owen's final meeting with the Bratva leader. In the video, Owen's voice was steady. "I didn't come to negotiate. I came to end this." Then came the gunshot. The screen went dark. Evelyn collapsed to her knees. Wind howled through the open window, scattering papers across the room like shattered memories. She cried, but among her tears was something new. Relief. Owen had kept his word. He'd ended it the only way he knew how. A month later, the police officially closed the Parker case. No body was ever found, only a bracelet tangled among the rocks near the Connecticut River, where the golden lights from Riverside Cafe still glowed each night. Evelyn went there one autumn evening. She sat at their old table, her tea growing cold, her belly now beginning to show. When the golden light spilled through the glass, she smiled faintly. "You were afraid to leave," she whispered, "but maybe you never really did." Across the river through the thick mist, she saw a figure tall in a dark coat watching her. She blinked and he was gone. Evelyn stayed seated, her hand resting on her belly. "My child," she whispered, "if one day you ask who your father was, tell them he was a man who didn't know how to love until he finally learned a little too late." Outside, the wind stilled. The sky broke open, a soft beam of light spilling across the river. And under the shadow of the golden lamp, the story of Owen and Evelyn, thought to have ended quietly, continued somewhere else, where light still waited for those who had once been lost. A year later. Winter came again to New Hampshire, the first since Owen's disappearance. Snow blanketed the hills around the Parker estate so still that only the wind could be heard sweeping through the dry pines. Evelyn stood in the garden, one hand on her flat stomach. She was no longer pregnant. The baby, the only thing she and Owen had left to share, never made it into the world. Everything had shattered in a single night. She lost him, lost the child, and was left with nothing but Ruth and a house as cold and silent as a tomb. Still, she stayed. Not because she was waiting, but because the house held the last trace of a man she had once loved, with fragile, desperate faith. On the first snowy day, Ruth placed an envelope on the table. "The police sent this back," she said softly. "They found it in the archives, probably misplaced." Evelyn opened it. Inside was the final report from the Parker Industries case, and a short, handwritten note. No body recovered. Only dried blood near the iron bridge. Probability of survival, 3%. 3%. A cruelly small number, but for Evelyn, it was everything. 3% hope. 3% of a heartbeat that refused to die, that maybe somewhere in the cold world he once ruled Owen Parker was still alive. That afternoon, she walked through the city. Snow fell softly, covering the riverside buildings in white. She stopped in front of Riverside Cafe, the place where it had all begun and where it had all ended. The new owner, an elderly man with silver hair, smiled as she stepped in. "You're the woman from the photograph, aren't you?" Evelyn froze. "What photograph?" He pointed toward the wall near the bar. There, in a black and white frame, was a picture taken from afar. Her and Owen sitting by the window, golden light falling over his face, peaceful, as if guilt had never existed. "That man helped me pay off my debts," the old man said quietly. Before he disappeared, he left the photo and told me, "If a woman ever comes back, hang this up, she'll need a place to remember." Evelyn's hands trembled. "Do you know where he went?" The old man shook his head. He didn't say, but in his eyes, a man about to leave, I could tell one thing. He'd found his reason to live again. That night, Evelyn returned to the mansion. Ruth had grown frailer, but kept everything untouched. Owen's chair, his unfinished cup of tea, the open sheet music for Chopin still on the piano. "Do you still hope?" Ruth asked, sighing. "Sometimes hope can be a punishment." Evelyn smiled faintly. "No, Ruth. To me, it's a promise." She went upstairs to the library and opened Jonathan's old notebook. Between the tangled notes on Bratva's network, she found a folded page hidden at the back. The handwriting wasn't Jonathan's. It was Owen's. "If you're reading this, it means I'm still alive. But I can't return. I have to finish what Jonathan couldn't and repay both our debts. When winter comes again, if you still remember me, go to the Connecticut River. I'll leave a sign." 3 days later, snow fell thick and heavy. Evelyn wrapped herself in wool and drove to the river. Everything was as it had been, bare trees, frozen water. The golden light from Riverside cutting through the mist. She walked along the bank, searching for something she couldn't name. When she reached the iron bridge, she stopped. On the railing was a fresh mark, a small circle crossed by a diagonal line, the same symbol etched on Owen's wrist. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. Below it, in silver paint, someone had written, "Still breathing." OP. Evelyn fell to her knees, tears melting into snow. He was alive. No face, no voice. Just those 2 words, and it was enough to make every wound inside her tremble back to life. Winter passed slowly. Evelyn began to paint again, opening a small gallery in town. Every painting shared the same theme, light within darkness. People said her art looked as if she were waiting for someone, and she only smiled, never denying it. One evening, as the snow began to thaw, she received an anonymous package. Inside was an unfinished painting, a man standing by a riverbank, turned hand resting on the bridge. In the corner, a line of delicate handwriting. "When I'm ready to return, let me be seen by your eyes, not by my scars." She knew instantly who had sent it. She cried not from grief, but from the strange relief of knowing that her longing was no longer a chain, but a thread that kept her alive. March came. The snow melted wildflowers blooming along the path to the mansion. Ruth passed away in her sleep after a heart attack, still holding the old photograph of Owen and Evelyn in her hands. The funeral was small. Evelyn stood silent as the church bells echoed across the valley. When everyone left, she stayed behind. The wind rustled through the pines, lifting the scarf from her shoulders. She turned to catch it and saw him. Owen stood at the edge of the woods, taller, leaner, a long coat draped over his shoulders. His face sharper, but his eyes unchanged. He didn't move closer. He simply stood there. She took a step toward him. Then another. Snow crunched beneath her boots. When only a few feet separated them, he spoke, voice low, trembling slightly. "I promised I'd come back when it was over. But I've learned nothing ever really ends." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Because we're both unfinished pieces of each other." He took a step forward, then another, until the space between them disappeared. Their breaths mingled in the cold air. Owen raised a trembling hand, brushing her cheek. "I don't know if I deserve to come back," he whispered. "You don't need permission," she said, tears falling. "You just need courage." They stood there until the snow beneath them melted. When he pulled her into his arms, Evelyn could hear his heartbeat steady now, no longer guarded, no longer broken. "I still don't believe in miracles," Owen murmured. "That's all right." She smiled through tears. "I believe enough for both of us." That night, for the first time in a year, the fireplace in the Parker mansion burned again. The golden glow lit the old photograph of the 3 Parker brothers. only one of them still alive. Owen sat quietly staring into the flames. Evelyn poured him a glass of wine and handed it over. "You used to hate wine," he said. "But you once told me," she replied softly, "that bitterness is how we remember we're still alive." He chuckled, setting the glass down and looking at her. "Evelyn, do you know why I chose you out of all the people I've ever met?" "Because I'm a fool," she teased lightly. He shook his head. "Because you saw the real man in me even when I tried to bury him." Evelyn touched his cheek. "And now you don't have to hide anymore." Outside, the snow stopped falling. Inside, the piano played for the first time in months, the same nocturne. But this time, it wasn't sorrowful. It was warm. Evelyn sat beside him, head resting on his shoulder. Neither spoke, because sometimes love doesn't need to be declared, only lived. And as night fell, the golden lamp by the window flickered back to life, just like the night it had all begun. No longer the light of the past, but a quiet promise between two souls who had lost everything, that no matter how many winters returned, they would always find each other again, under the same sky beneath the same light. Part 10, The Last Light. 1200. Words, cinematic emotional healing, ending with a gentle CTA at the end. A year after Owen's return. Spring came late to New Hampshire, gentle, hesitant, as if even nature knew this place had witnessed too many storms. The snow melted slowly from the roof of the Parker mansion, revealing the first tender shoots of green. The scent of pine of earth of morning coffee mingled in the air, a fragrance of new beginnings. Evelyn poured the coffee sunlight spilling through the glass and casting her shadow across the wooden floor. Owen came downstairs, hair-damp shirt, crisp white. "You're up early," he said, voice still husky from sleep. "I'm used to it." "Here dawn always comes before you realize it." He sat down, took the cup from her hand. A quiet, simple moment yet, for them it was the rarest kind of luxury. "You're leaving New Hampshire, aren't you?" she asked, not looking up. Owen set the cup down silent for a beat. "The company's gone. The Parker name exists only in investigation files now. But there are still a few people who deserve their freedom." Evelyn looked at him, eyes filled with both faith and fear. "You don't have to redeem your past by disappearing again." "It's not disappearing," he said softly. "It's closure." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then let me go with you." He shook his head gently. "This time I want you to stay. Not to hide, but to live. Sometimes staying is its own kind of courage." Evelyn bit her lip. She understood, but understanding didn't make it easier. She'd already lost him once. She wasn't sure her heart could survive a second time. That afternoon, Owen drove to the harbor where someone was waiting. A man in a brown coat posture, slightly stooped, eyes sharp but tired. "Took you long enough to show up," the man said. "You're alive," Edward Owen replied. "That's enough." Edward gave a dry laugh, lighting a cigarette. "Jonathan always believed you'd do the right thing. I didn't. Maybe I was wrong." Owen handed him a hard drive. "Every remaining record of Bratva's operations. If you want justice, use it. But don't do it in my name." "And the girl?" Edward asked. A faint smile crossed Owen's lips. "She's the reason I'm still breathing, and the reason I can't go back." Edward nodded slowly. "Then keep that promise." By the time Owen returned, dusk had fallen over the mansion. Evelyn was in the garden, pressing the buttons of an old phonograph he'd once repaired. Nocturne filled the air, not mournful this time, but tender, full of quiet resolution. He came up behind her. "It's done," he said softly. "And what did you get in return?" Owen met her eyes. "A second chance." Evelyn smiled through the fading light. "Then keep it," she said. "Don't let it turn into another memory." That night, they lit candles in the library, the same place that had once sheltered them from the storm. On the walls hung old photos of Jonathan and Marie, no longer hidden in drawers. "You're not afraid of them anymore?" she asked. "No," he said quietly, "because now they're not wounds, they're witnesses." He looked up, voice deep but calm. "She once asked if I believed in love that lasts, the kind that stays after everything else ends. I said no. Now I know it exists." Evelyn smiled, tears glistening. And it chooses us even when we don't believe. Late at night. Snow began to fall again, thin as a whisper of memory. Owen and Evelyn sat by the fireplace, fingers intertwined. "Do you remember the photo at Riverside?" he asked. "The one on the wall?" "How could I forget?" "The photographer wasn't random," he said softly. "I asked him. I wanted to keep that moment the way you looked at me without fear." Evelyn chuckled, nudging him gently. "You plan everything. Even emotions." "No," he said, eyes warm. "You're the one thing I never planned." Silence fell soft, comforting. Outside, snow drifted quietly. Inside, the firelight danced across their faces, familiar yet new. The next morning, Evelyn woke to find a note on the table. Hastily written lines in Owen's handwriting. "I'm meeting Edward one last time. Don't wait. If it snows, play the piano." She read it again and again, her chest tightening. Part of her wanted to chase after him. Another part, the one that finally understood him, knew this was how he needed to end it. By noon, the snow was falling thick. She opened the piano. Her fingers trembled as they touched the keys. Music filled the house, soft, fragile notes, mingling with the rhythm of snow outside. Halfway through the melody, she heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. Her heart skipped. The door opened. Owen stood there, shoulders dusted with snow, lips pale from the cold, but his eyes were bright. "You came back," she whispered, as if afraid the sound would break the moment. He placed an envelope on the table. "Justice is done. No one's after us anymore. From today, Parker is just a name, nothing more." Evelyn ran to him, arms wrapping around his chest. "Do you know how afraid I've been?" "I know," he murmured. "But I also know you never stopped believing." A month later, the mansion was no longer a refuge, it was a home. Evelyn taught art to children in Jonathan's old room. Owen tended the garden, repaired the piano, and sometimes left a single white flower on her desk. Always quietly, never letting her catch him in the act. Each morning they shared coffee. No sharp words, no distance. Just warmth, the quiet, ordinary kind they once thought they'd never have. One late spring afternoon, Evelyn opened the window. A soft breeze carried the scent of new grass. Owen sat in the yard, reading under the light. She watched him for a long time, the man who had once held the world in his hands, now content in a small garden. She stepped outside, her voice, light as the wind. "You once said you didn't believe in miracles." "I did," he smiled, closing the book. And now Owen looked up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now I do, because you are one." She laughed through tears, wrapping her arms around him. They stood in the garden as white petals drifted around them. In that moment, there was no shadow, no guilt, only light. The last light, the kind that comes late but warms the soul all the same. The camera pulls back from the window, two silhouettes in an embrace beneath the setting sun. Evelyn's voice narrates, "I once thought love existed only in fleeting moments, like lightning between storms. But now I know sometimes it's the darkness that helps us recognize the light. And if you've ever feared you loved the wrong person, remember maybe you just loved the right one at the wrong time." If this story touched your heart, share it. Not to tell Owen and Evelyn's tale, but to remind someone that true love isn't about perfection, it's about having the courage to return even after loss. Because light, even when it comes last, is still light.